And
Nice.
we're out. So hey everybody. Welcome
Afternoon.
What's happening?
Welcome to Refresh Friday. So live on Facebook. Looks like people are starting to tune in. And if you didn't know, we've got Mike Lane and Rick Gibbs here from a number of places. We don't want to just say Dealer.com. They're involved in a lot of different things. And of course, myself, Alex Snyder, and Jeff Kirshner from DealerRefresh. So we wanted to start on and jump right in here because I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. You know, this goes back a ways, but we wanted to start with the present. So, and really trying to get an understanding of what Rick and Mike are about, and they're not just about, you know, Fords anymore. I think everyone heard all that, by the way. But what really drives you guys now versus what drove you when you got started with Dealer.com? Who wants to go first with that one?
I don't know. I guess I'll go first. What drives me today is really just like solving the puzzle. Like there's a puzzle in front of you, an opportunity, and like I really enjoy like trying to figure out the puzzle pieces, put them together. It's not a simple puzzle typically. It's like something that's super complex, an opportunity, and like trying to put all those pieces together, whether that's people or technology, and wherever that is, in and outside of auto. You just try to, I don't know, it gets me off.
Versus in 1998 when Dealer.com was getting started.
I think just at my heart, I'm an entrepreneur. So I think that was from early days, and that was really what drove me to like want to get involved with Dealer.com, which was like earthcars.com way back in the day when we first started it, right? So that drive is still with me today. Just keeps me going, not sitting around.
What about you, Rick? What drives you today?
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of similar to what it drove me, back in the day. It was working with people and assembling like a really good group of people to work on some of those complex problems that Mike was talking about. There was just so much joy, and even joy today when you get people around you and brainstorming and getting an empty whiteboard and, just having a little fun, trying to figure out a new way of solving a problem or challenging an industry. And, I think back in the day when we started this thing in 98, 99, I don't know if we knew any better. I mean, we all had that entrepreneurial spirit, but at that point it was just like, go, go, go. And nowadays it's a little bit more measured because I feel like we've learned a lot. So I think what's driving me the most right now is all the experiences that we've had to date, sort of learning from those and moving forward.
So putting puzzles together.
Lots of them.
Well, with that said, what were y'all doing before Dealer.com?
Oh man, so I think that was when the web just got started, right? The internet was becoming popular, so anybody that could code an HTML page was a web developer or director of e-commerce at the time. So pretty much all of us were doing some form of consulting, and we were building different e-com websites. And both of us went to school for engineering and got out of school and became consultants and tried to take advantage of what was happening in the .com era at the time.
Now, were you hard coding or using front page?
So Mike was probably using Dreamweaver at the time, and I was more behind the scenes doing the hard coding side of things. But it made for a good partnership for sure.
Weaver. That was the tool of the day.
Yes.
Help you press faster. Long dead. So
Plenty of days drawing up some sort of website inside of Dreamweaver and then pasting the HTML into the back end of a Dealer.com website.
Even before that, it was Flash websites were the whole thing, right? Giant Flash intros for the car dealer websites, and that's actually how we made most of our money back in the day, was selling the intros first and then a cheap website to go with it.
I think that's what hooked us.
Yeah,
I remember wasn't it Dealer Skins that had the big flashy websites back then?
Yeah, their whole platform was based around Flash at the time, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, there was a lot of innovation going on back in that day because limited technologies that we all had to work with. So we were trying to do the best we could with whatever was out there.
Yeah,
DZ, right?
we had a Dealer Skins site, and I remember. I mean, it performed well. It was flashy, of course, and but at about a year into it, that's when SEO really started to take off. And of course, it was really difficult to optimize any type of Flash websites. So I remember bouncing off of them after about a year or two. I forget who we went with back then. After them, yeah.
Yeah, you were a little ahead of the time there, Jeff, thinking about SEO back then.
Yeah, because there was only a few. There was only, I think, one or two companies, and I thought it was AIM SEO or something like that would come in, and then I guess they would build these style sheets for each page. That for each Flash page, they were building some type of style sheet, and they would upload those style sheets for SEO only. And of course, back then it was just stuffing a bunch of keywords onto some file.
Yep. Well, speaking of keywords, Mike, you mentioned Earth Cars earlier. I don't know how many people know that. Wasn't that the original company name?
Yeah, the original company name was Earth Cars. That was back in 1998. That was spawned out of Mark on Figley's dealership, Earth Cars, that we had in Wilson, Vermont, where I first met him. And we took that name, and then later became Dealer.com when we could acquire that domain. We set the company and the branding.
And that dealership's still there, right?
2002. Yeah, the dealership's still there. They sold it. He owned that with his brother, Andy, and then Mark was focused on the Earth Cars /Dealer.com business. And his brother ran the dealership for years, and they eventually sold that. But it's still there today. Small lot, selling, late model cars in a sales pressure-free environment is really what they were about. So,
wasn't the other idea to somebody wanted a particular vehicle, especially a used vehicle, and they would find it for them?
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the key features. It was on every Dealer.com website, right? Find my car. It's still out there today, and that was essentially just asking the customer what they wanted, right? Especially used inventory is pretty limited. Mark came up with this concept to basically just let the customer ask what they want, and then put it in a database, and then you can see all that data, and you can use that for your buying decisions, right? If there's 10 people that want an F-150 under 30,000 miles, go pick one up at auction, and then email them with the photos and all the details of that, and then suddenly you get a bunch of people requesting, and the likelihood to sell that car has obviously gone up versus just guessing what the customers wanted. So that was a core fundamental.
It's a crazy idea in the late 90s.
Yeah,
Make a buy list from online interest?
Yeah, I mean, Mark figured it out pretty early, just the aspect of merchandising cars, right? I mean, I found him because I was driving my car from college still, which was an 86 Volkswagen Jetta. And I had that car for $800 in college, and 3 years later I was still driving it. When I bought it, it had 137,000 miles on it. And the lady said the odometer stopped 2 years before she sold it to me. And I drove it for 3 years. So this thing, and I drove that all over the northeastern United States. So this thing must have had 200,000 miles on it.
That happened to every mid-'80s Volkswagen at about 130,000 miles.
Stop. You don't want to know.
Speedometer breaks.
So I was searching online, and his dealership came up. And he had I was looking for another Jetta at the time. And I was coming home. I was living in Boston at the time. And I was coming home. I was I'll just stop at his dealership. I mean, he had multiple photos of the car, lots of different angles, big pictures too. 800 by 600 resolution, full screen, like other dealerships weren't doing, right? I mean, 99.9% of dealerships had no photos. If they had photos, it was one photo of a car, and it was partial 1% of their inventory. Maybe 1 or 2 units had actually had photos on them. He had every single car out there that had every photo. So it was a pretty engaging experience, and brought me into his dealership where we started talking. And over the course of like several weeks, it turned into months, which turned into years. I really liked his ideas, and he really wanted to figure out how to scale this concept of taking and merchandising cars really well and sell that to other dealerships. And then originally his thesis, because Cobalt was already in the space, right? Even back in 1998, and he wanted to be able to sell this to used car dealers. So I went back to Boston, and I knew Rick and Jamie and Ryan were all down there. We all went to school together, and we decided that we were going to moonlight and on the side build a system that would actually be able to be scaled up and get that out there. After a few months of like doing this, we figured out that this was probably a pretty big opportunity, because you start looking at like the Cobalt websites and the other players out there. I can't even remember them. I think Auto Trader paid like a giant sum for some company that was like terrible. We're like, we have already built something in 2 months that was better than the company. So we decided, and that we were just going to start a business. And we all packed up a U-Haul. I mean, I remember us like shoving the mattress in the back door and like and we all moved back up to Burlington. I was from there, the other guys weren't, but we moved to Burlington. We all lived in the same house. We started getting this company going, and that's kind of how the early days went. We 100 hours a week, and just to get this thing going. We didn't know what we were doing necessarily. Like, we knew what we had to do technically to execute it, but to like go out and actually start selling and make this happen was in front of us.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, how did you guys, did you hire some foot soldiers, or was it just mostly through telephone, or how did you get it in front of all the dealerships out there? And then what were some of the milestones? How long did it take to get to 50, 100, 1,000?
Well, the first couple dealerships, Mark was a sales guy. He focused on sales primarily, and then like put in a lot of product ideas, and sat side by side with us too on trying to get us to like implement his concepts. The first dealership we ever signed up was Greensboro Garage in Greensboro, Vermont. If you've ever been up in the Northeast Kingdom, you may have just and not even seen it. You go down a couple dirt roads, and it's a dirt lot selling Volvos. Back then, they focused on Volvos. And the first day they got their website was the first day they got a computer. So, like, we're showing them how to use a mouse and a digital camera and merchandise their cars, and then they were up. It's like complete business transformation in one day. And our second client was Lexus of Westminster, and Mark got that sale through, I think, a relationship. And they were paying like very different prices too. Like Greensboro Garage, I think, was like $199 a month for a website, and then Lexus West was their domain. I remember it well. Spent a lot of time on that. And they were paying something like $1,000 a month because they wanted the best premium solution they could get. So that was a quick determination too for us that used car dealers don't pay as much as new car dealers.
Stay clear of that business.
Yeah, we really focused on new car dealers.
We're going after the OEMs.
Yeah, exactly. But it was like, we got a dozen dealers over the course of probably like 6 months. So it took a long time to get going.
How did you guys, how were you able to fund it during that time?
We did what a lot of startups do, is we begged friends and family for money, right?
There you go.
Put together, I think, just massive amounts of business plans and craziness that ended up being kind of a waste of time, because when we actually explained the vision to friends and family and some people in the industry and around town, they saw what we were trying to do, and just the charisma that Mark had with raising money worked out really well. So we raised an initial chunk of money to just get us going, right? And sort of rent the office, get the nice computers, that sort of thing up and running. And then subsequently, a little bit later in life, maybe about a year or two later, we raised a little bit more. But all in all, we didn't raise more than $1 million, $2 million total to get this thing going.
You mean over the entire Dealer.com lifespan?
Correct. I mean, we definitely took on some money to buy out shareholders and some strategic deals and things like that. But what was interesting about the timing of all this is it all happened right during the dot bomb, right? So we got the initial sort of company up and running, and then all of a sudden we had to learn how to be a real business very fast, because we couldn't raise more money. We had to sort of buckle down and create a business that would survive, versus other companies that were raising $100 million and going out of business a month later. So it actually saved us at the end of the day, the dot bomb, because it forced us to be disciplined with our money, really control expenses, and have very good measured growth. And a lot of those learnings, I think both Mike and I pass on to a lot of the companies we work with today. So it was a hard lesson to learn at the time, going without wages for 6 months to a year at a time, and having to cut wages of employees and being in it all together. It was definitely a rocket ride for many, many years.
So just to recap real quick for anyone who's tuning in now. Well, actually, one more question before we recap. How old were y'all when it started? Was it fresh after college, or
were you
a little
22?
Yeah,
22, 23, somewhere around there.
And was Mark a little older, though?
He was like 20 years older than us. I hope he's listening. No, he was only a few years older than us.
So he was your gray hair in the group at like 25.
Until we hired Mike DeChico.
All right, so in your 20s, in the late 90s, started Earth Cars, later became Dealer.com, and over the entire lifespan of the business, you raised maybe $2 million. Yeah. Right? That's impressive. I mean, we're going through a raise in my company right now, and I know what that's like. Mike, you told me it's about 300 hours per every funding round, and it's a lot of work that goes into these things. So hats off to you. And that's, if anybody's been thinking about making a company, and that's one of the reasons why we're talking today, is to let people have an understanding of what's involved as best we can in an hour-long show. But that's a big one, funding. So if you don't mind, since both of you are investors and you sit on various boards, and Mike, I know you sit on with a group of people that actually tries to make businesses in Vermont and get them started. Do you mind talking about that a little bit, and then we'll jump back into a little more Dealer.com?
Sure. Yeah, I sit on the board of BSET, and it's a group organization here in Vermont that's really focused on getting entrepreneurs up and running. So if you get an idea and don't know what to do with it, you can basically come in and get some mentoring just on sizing your market, understanding the steps you need to go through. Or if you know that stuff already, you need help with fundraising or different aspects of the business, you can just come in and get different levels of assistance. And then sometimes that organization even puts money into it to help seed the company. Because oftentimes, investors are always, when they hear a good idea, right? But who's put money on the table, right? If someone's already put $50,000 down and said, hey, this is a legit idea, then it's a lot easier for other investors to come in after and say, all right, someone has vetted this. It's a good organization that's giving them counsel and get the business up and running. So they've had a pretty good success rate with that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool what you guys are doing. And Rick, you're doing a bit of the same. Um,
Yeah, I've been just investing in a lot of local companies, ranging from some local breweries and restaurants all the way up to some automotive tech companies that are trying to change the world again. So it's quite the gamut around town, but it's definitely interesting and fun to be part of the smaller companies again, and being, part of that energy when you're creating something from scratch. And it's definitely something I've missed for a long time.
and solving that puzzle that drives you to.
Again, yep.
That's the fun part. And these small companies, I also, angel invest too. And my buy is probably 20 different companies right now. And it's just fun to see people like with a passion and an idea, like go out there and try to figure it out. You can help steer them in the right direction. It's pretty rewarding to watch.
So when you guys were starting Dealer.com and doing your friends and family round, how were you approaching people? Like, how did you come up with a valuation for the company? And
What was it, the dartboard at the time?
Every idea was for 20 million back then.
Yep.
Every
Yeah, honestly, I mean, at the initial phases, we were just making up valuation based on what we thought the market opportunity was, and quickly learned that we had overvaluated the company pretty dramatically. And when we started talking to some professional investors and bringing people with a little bit more experience on, we realized how far overvalued we are. And when we did our next round, we actually did a pretty big down round at the time. But it's a really hard equation, because you don't want to go out with visions of grandeur out of the gate. You got to be extremely realistic so that you can grow it over time. But it's a function of what your market opportunity is, how good your team is, and how good your product is at the end of the day. And if you're missing any one of those key components, you're kind of dead in the water, unfortunately.
It's a bit of an art, right? As I've been told.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So Jeff was asking a moment ago, or a few minutes ago, I should say, feels like time's flying here, that he was wondering when you guys hit how long it took you to hit 100 clients, and then, did it exponentially grow after that point? Is that a good milestone to go after?
Yeah, you learn a lot by your first 100 clients. I was thinking about this the other day. Mike and I were talking, and we thought it was maybe early 2000, a couple years in. We were really focused on making sure the technology worked as best as it could before bringing on too many customers. We didn't really have marketing dollars or anything, so the little logo at the bottom of our website was the thing that was driving demand for us. But it was getting to that first 100 clients probably took a couple years. Then it sort of slowly grew until sort of a inflection point around, 2007, 2008 timeframe, where we just started completely doubling the business year after year after year. So, and for us, that was sort of the tipping point of selling dealers one at a time to selling the larger dealer groups, selling into the OEMs, and sort of catapulting the business that way. But if we had started with those clients early on, just like if we were to raise a ton of money early on, we probably would have been crushed under our own weight, because those first 5 to 7 years, we learned how many mistakes we were actually making, and we learned a lot from those years, and we're able to screw up on a little bit smaller scale before really igniting the company.
Yeah, we get the fundamentals down too. So you can have a business and maybe you only have 3 clients, right? But it's really about the dollar amounts, right? The first big milestone is to get to $100,000 in reoccurring revenue, right? Reoccurring revenue business. That's what Dealer.com is. It's try to encourage everyone to get into, because they can exponentially grow. And we're all involved in some flavor of those, right? The whole premise of getting over that milestone, right? You get over $1 million in business, you've got some scale, you figured some things out, and for us that was a big mile marker, because we hit that $100,000 mark during the 2001 dot bomb, because we had to. We had a short runway, and some investors gave us some money. Jason Chapnick, who ended up being our chairman of our board for years, and he basically was like, this is your runway, go do it. And we had to execute. And the fundamentals of our execution had been like build the best products, provide the best service. Because when you do those two things, your churn is minimized, right? People want your products, and you're passionate about your customers, and they're passionate about you. Like, things can grow from that. So we got those fundamentals out of the way, and then we eventually got over that 100,000 mark, which also made us profitable because we had cut our expenses during that time to that mark, and then we were able to just continue to reinvest over and over and stack that up. Not that we were like making a ton of money, but everything we were making just got reinvested.
Who was the first OEM that you guys signed up with, and how did you go about crafting those deals? I know I've been on the vendor side, and working with the OEMs can be a real pain in the ass.
Yeah.
They're not a pain in the ass on the dealer side.
Not at all.
It was actually it was a really cool sales pitch back then, because we, instead of just selling them on a vision, we were selling them on results. So we could actually go to an OEM and say, hey, 20% of your dealers are already on dealer.com, and this is the results you're getting. So there was, gosh, I remember this because it was probably one of the most awkward meetings I think Mike and I ever had. Outside of getting thrown out of an OEM once, Mark and I did, which was very early days, but we won't mention the name there. But Mike and I went up to Canada to pitch Chrysler Canada, and it was, probably the most awkward meeting I think either of us had ever had, and we were trying to make ourselves feel good. So we were like, okay, $20 for the person that can do a Tony Robbins impression in the middle of the meeting. So like, just hit the hands, fly it to the north. So we're right in the middle of this presentation. There's a horseshoe presentation room, 20 executives lined up. Mike and I up front, we're, late 20s, trying to do it, and Mike leads it off with a Tony Robbins smack. And I think both of us cracked up internally and got the meeting going, and we ended up winning Chrysler Canada, and which then turned into the U.S. business and sort of was our first OEM deal. But part of our culture was not taking ourselves too seriously, and I think some of that, breaking the ice and making ourselves laugh a little bit is kind of the reason we were so successful over the years.
I think there was some outward laughing.
Yeah. And a couple dirty looks.
You can imagine the conference room. It's like typical like OEM situation, right? We're in a hotel that they had everyone go to in a giant conference room, like probably 5,000 square feet, and there's a small horseshoe table set up in one corner with lights on only over that area, with like 10 people, and then you're like just in this giant space of like just focused on little presentation. So yeah, Chrysler Canada was the first one. They gave us a swing at that, and Sonic was the first large OEM, or not OEM, dealer group. When Rachel and her team kind of came up, they flew up. That was actually one of the first days we were in our new building that we built, that they came up, and that was Halloween too, and everyone was dressed up. They loved that.
So the whole company was dressed up in costume, and we're parading our largest potential client around, and I think it actually helped seal the deal. I mean, we set up the conference room the day before, so.
I mean, Scott came up too, didn't they?
Yeah.
They brought the whole crew.
Brian and everybody was, and they've been loyal supporters of Dealer.com, and been mentors to both Mike and I over the years, and we definitely wouldn't be here without the help of Sonic at the end of the day.
Yeah, you mentioned Rachel. I forgot all about Rachel. Wonder what she's up to these days.
Can't forget Rachel.
I know.
Awesome.
Yeah. So revenues, dealers work a little differently. Definitely revenues are there, but it's all about profit. You're thinking, you're selling cars. It's, how much gross you get on this one, front and back, and so forth and so on. But in the world that the vendors live in, it's revenues, and it's kind of two types, isn't it? It's like monthly recurring and then annual. And how do those typically get looked at?
So it depends. I'll start, and it correct me where I'm wrong. It It's interesting. It depends on the stage of growth that you're in. So for us in the early days, it was all about revenue, right? And getting monthly recurring revenue. So much so that the setup fees or one-time type of revenue didn't matter to us as much. It helped with sort of cash flow, but we were constantly looking at how much monthly recurring revenue we could bring in and how much of that we could retain. And then as we sort of got to that cash flow positive side of things, we then really started focusing on EBITDA to really understand the profitability of the business. And towards the end of the tour with Dealer.com, before we sold it, it was all about how much profit or how much cash you could generate, because it was easy to bring in top line revenue growth, but it was hard to build a profitable, efficient business. And that's one of the reasons Dealer.com sold for so much, is that we were extremely good at managing our expenses and how we invested our dollars. And we're able to generate a lot of EBITDA and cash that we could make the decision of either reinvesting back in or saving for whatever a future opportunity would be. So initially, though, it was just getting dollars in so we would have flexibility and optionality in the future.
And just for myself, because before I was a vendor and back in my dealer days, I had never heard the term EBITDA. You mind defining that one for the audience?
Earnings before, Jesus, I was good at
Isn't it interest, taxes?
interest, taxes, amortization, and Wayne, I can feel him just like yelling at me right now through the thing.
It's basically the true profit, right?
The true profit of the company.
Before you have to pay your taxes, because obviously like positive EBITDA is you're making money, right? And you have to pay taxes and you have to do all this stuff. So it's like a number investors look at and say like, how much is this organization bringing in, right? And that's well, as you mature as a business, like that's what you want. You want to see positive EBITDA. Typically, now there's companies out there today that will run in the red that are even publicly traded. We've seen some of those that just lose money hand over fist, right? And then you wonder, like, if the world changes, like, I don't know, a global pandemic, how are they going to operate going forward? Like, I don't know, the Ubers of the world, right? And we all wonder, like, what's going to happen to them? And they had to shed their expenses massively, right? Massive layoff, massive changes, restructure the business. So I always like look at, what is the fundamentals of the business in terms of like, can it survive even in a downturn? And those are really what you want to build, is those types of businesses, that they can grow organically, they can get profitable, and then turn a positive EBITDA. And then even for Dealer.com, we didn't really know what it was back then either. 2001, the early days, we just had someone on our board, Alan, who basically said like 30%. He said that, and we just put that in our budget from there on out. And then later, more professional investors came in the later days, like Excel, and they were like, holy crap, you guys have been doing this. Really? And it was basically from one little comment someone said once that we kind of took as law, that we kind of just went for.
And by the way, Andy Bolin came to your rescue, Rick, so defined it for you.
I thought of it afterwards. Interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. It's we're not the finance guys at the end of the day. We surrounded ourselves with them.
It just proves that there's other things to pay attention to too.
Right, like a badass product that can generate good revenue.
There you go. So speaking of revenue some more, there's the other side of it, which is the churn portion. What's a good churn rate to, well, let's just say, how about I ask that a different way? What's a really bad churn rate, that zero obvious, or 100% is obviously a big one, but if you're like churning more than 20% of your clients, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, for a modern software company, kind of like Dealer.com was, anything below 90% retention or 10% churn is considered pretty bad. So if you were above 95% retention, you're industry leading. If you're 90 to 95, you're doing really kind of well, but below 90, it starts getting pretty hairy. So we were always striving to be above 95. We were up to 99 for quite a long time, and we just wanted to make sure that we were taking care of dealers and making sure that they were referenceable, right? And they were willing to recommend us to one of their friends. And honestly, that's how we grew, was word of mouth for many, many years. It's just those personal recommendations and referrals for new business. So we always strive to, keep everybody as happy as possible. And obviously working with some clients like, Checkered Flag was a little more difficult than others, but we made it work for most.
Yeah. There's an asshole there you got to watch out for. Fortunately, he's not there anymore.
I know, he left. He's got this other little company, right?
Went to go work for you. So another big question here. How much did NADA cost?
Which year?
Let's see. Was it the ZZ Top one or?
I mean, the first NADAs, you would laugh. Like, we didn't have a booth. We had discount airline tickets. We shared hotel rooms, like crappy hotel rooms, and we were canvassing the floor, like all the crap NADA does not want you just doing and handing out stuff. We did all that stuff. I think Mark even put flyers on cars and got in trouble in the parking lots, type stuff. So that was pretty cheap. That was probably like a couple grand we spent. In the later days, when all those shows were going on, it's millions of dollars to put those on. But yeah,
You guys always had some epic parties and shows, that's for sure.
yeah. I don't even know. I was at NADA this past year, and there's no epic, crazy party anymore. It's kind of changed. There's events, but there wasn't the Black Crows playing.
Well, out of curiosity, how much was the booth? And do you lease those or?
Yeah, you basically do a multi-year lease because you never want to own that. It's 2 years from now if you're growing, or 3 years from now, it's basically useless. You want to change something, they got to redo the whole thing. There's companies out there that booth is probably someone else's now that they're leasing it to. Some other industry.
Gotcha. Maybe in the education business. No.
Totally.
Oh yeah, we do have a question from the audience. We'll throw out there because it's nice and timely. I was wondering how much the Black Crows I can't speak. The Black Crows, how much were they?
No idea, actually. Maybe Rick knows.
At the time when you're running a business, there's some questions you just don't want to be able to answer to your board. So we looked at it as a whole cost of NADA.
And why throw that much money at NADA?
Well, part of it was, we were really proud of the culture that had developed at Dealer.com, and a lot of what we were always trying to do is share that culture with the automotive industry, take a slightly different approach. And by throwing the parties, by throwing the extravagant booths, it was a way of showing who we truly were at the end of the day and how we just wanted to have some fun. And if we could actually give the industry a little bit of a break, during a nice long show and, go listen to some music, here's ZZ Top, Grace Potter, Blues Traveler, it's just something out of the ordinary. They might remember us a little bit more, and they might get a picture of who we were as individuals and who we were as a company and want to continue to do business with us. And not just because we threw the parties, but we were good people at the end of the day trying to solve some of those really complex problems. And it was just a way of sharing and giving back a little bit as well.
It's a great way to see everyone in a different environment, right? Like seeing someone on the show floor, you shake hands for 1 second, you can have a different conversation, right? When you're having a beer, watching a show, it's different. I think it's better. It's just trying to translate our culture as a company. Yeah.
Well, culture is a big one, and you guys took that to heart so much. Jeff, I know we were talking before. You were always interested in work-life balance, and you were wanting us to definitely jump on that one a bit. And
Well, I remember the first time I visited the offices up there in Vermont. I was like, this is how they've got the work-life balance figured out, because work was basically play up there as well. Obviously you guys were serious about the job, but you had so many things going on. The environment that you had built, I remember you guys had tennis courts and stuff in the offices. It was a pretty big establishment there. So I was always pretty impressed with that. Does it still make sense? Did the employees appreciate having that type of laxed, work environment? Did the employees appreciate it? Is that something? I see a lot of companies nowadays sort of steering away from that. Is that something you guys still focus on with your newer ventures?
It was never about the flash, right? It was never about having the fitness classes. It was never about, the tennis court or any of that stuff.
The massages.
It was never, maybe it was about.
That's why I started working there.
I just felt pretty damn good. It also represented that we trusted the employees to have that balance, and we created a culture of, it sounds like such a cliche, work hard, play hard, but the reality of it is we gave people space to really focus on the work and take breaks throughout the day and not have to micromanage their time. So it actually represented the trust that we had in the employee base, that they could have an outlet and they were trusted to not abuse those things. Of course you had the Joey every once in a while that would, be working out for 8 out of the 9 hours a day, and we'd have to have a talk, but that was the exception. People really enjoyed that we trusted them with the flexibility of working when they needed to and rallying when it came time. And I think it created a better culture at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And people who go to work for companies just because they have those amenities, that's the wrong thing. They got to be going to work for the culture that really wants to drive. And that's what we look for in a lot of the other companies right now, is eventually you can afford some of those luxuries, but it's more about how you treat your employees at the end of the day. At least that's my point of view.
Yeah, some of it is recruiting, when you want some of these things that people look for, right? We started a tech company in Burlington, Vermont, an automotive tech company, where there's literally no automotive people, very few, other than gearheads, and technologists were few.
It's hard to be a head owning a Subaru.
Right.
There's some badass Subarus out there. Hold on.
I'm not saying there aren't, but
but you wanted these things, right? We wanted people to know we're investing in employees, and that's one of the big things you do to this stuff. But we also had great benefits too that went along with that, like health, dental, vision, disability insurance, 401k, and matches, and all this stuff. People want to work for organizations that are there to take care of. And Mark was a big pusher of culture too, and his wife Marisa, who worked at the company too, is they basically helped really shape that stuff for us, especially in the early days, because oftentimes we just had our heads down, right? And you forget how important some of that stuff is.
Did you guys ever get to a point where maybe you were getting too large, where it made it tougher to manage? Not just the people, but just keeping the environment going, keeping that lifestyle, that work-life balance?
I told this story to someone this morning. A friend, Wick, remember Wick? As soon as we got to 100 employees, he walked into my office and said, "I'm giving my 4 weeks notice."
Really?
Company's way too big. It's all perspective, right? Some people joined Dealer at 300 and they thought it was a small company. And other people thought it was so big because the perspective just changed over time, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all relative. But, when we had 50 employees, Rick and I and everyone else, all the founders, we knew everyone's name and their spouse's names and their kids' names. And that gets really hard after you get to 100 people, and then you're adding another 100 the next year, and that gets diluted. So you lose some of that intimacy with your employees, right? Just understanding their lives on that level of detail. And that's one thing as you grow as an organization that is difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
Well, you also get a few layers of management that sometimes get in the way, right?
Yeah, and finding the right leadership team that believes in what you want to do, and are they good communicators, and can they cascade the vision and the direction and that culture down throughout the company, and keeping all that aligned. It becomes a lot of work. It goes from, a company of 50 people, it's just purely organic. You get into 300, you have to work at it, and you have to be intentional with what you do, and you have to have more company meetings. It can't be just go and hang out at Mike's house and grab a beer type of meeting anymore. It's got to be, this is what our goals are, this is where we're going, and then repeat it 500 times so that everyone's aligned and going in the same direction. It's work at the end of the day, but it still is enjoyable even at those bigger stages, because what you can do and how fast you can move is actually kind of interesting and fun too, until you can't.
How do you know when you've gotten large and really slowed down? Is there a sign that?
Yeah, we were reminiscing the other day when we were talking about doing this, and I think the way we summed it up and the way we were talking about it is when you're talking about executing more than you're actually executing, right? So when you're building roadmaps versus building product, when you're talking about strategy but not actually talking to clients, like when you start seeing those signals, it means you're probably a little too big, or you've lost focus on what you're doing at the end of the day. And, identifying those is absolutely incredible. Identifying places in the company that are not living up to your standard. And if you start letting some of those things go, you might be getting to that point where you're now into a very large enterprise where it's harder to keep that sort of quality and that speed moving at a fast pace.
So basically, whenever you're setting up meetings, to set up more meetings.
Yeah, or I once heard people practicing for a meeting, and I was like, no. This is the beginning of the end. So let's do 6 dry runs before we go and present.
Well, Dealer.com is really known for the websites and such. Was there a point where you felt as if, okay, we've sort of hit the market share threshold, and maybe we should start focusing on additional products? I know you guys had a CRM out for a while. I'm not sure whatever happened to that. At what point were you able to say, okay, we've sort of exhausted the market with our dealership websites? Maybe we should focus and look at something else. And how do you go about that? And what made you decide to figure out what other technologies you would get into?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of a SaaS business, right, is like that reoccurring revenue. So you're always trying to do 2 things for that exponential curve. You're trying to get your existing clients to pay you more, and then you're trying to onboard more clients and move as few as possible, right? So to get clients paying more, there's that introduction of new product, right? Product packaging changes. In 2001 when AdWords came out, we put my credit card down and we started managing SEM at that point in time for dealers. As that that grew and grew and grew, and that dollar was just as big as the website business by the time we sold. But then SEO started really 2003, 2004. That became a product in itself, right? And then
by the way, Mike, I got to interrupt you. You're moving too far away from it, but we got to throw a shout out to Total Control Dominator, the best product name ever.
Not really disappointing people.
that was your paid search piece, right?
It was awesome.
Enough said.
Shout out to Mayhew on that one too, by the way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's the whole business, though. Is right. How do you get that to kind of just build on top of each other, add more products and services as the market moves to build CRMs? Not everything is successful. I mean, we actually built at one point in time a build your own website kit, and we spent a year building that. And
I remember you. Matter of fact, when I was at Mile One, Rick came in. You had shown that to us. You were demoing it to us.
Yeah, not all ideas work.
I don't even think it was quite out yet.
But did we close the deal at the time?
Not on that, but yeah. No.
No. Not everyone was ready for our vision at the time, I imagine.
I liked it. I was pushing for it. Yeah.
Well, speaking of products, and Jeff touched on CRM for a minute, but the world's changed a lot in the world of technology, obviously, and it'll continue to do so. It's a lot faster. Maybe is the right word. I don't know, to get a product off the ground today than it was back then. You don't have to build servers and email systems and all kinds of things anymore. You can get a third party and plug it right in. If you were to put a dollar amount on how much it might have cost to actually get the CMS up and going that Dealer.com was, is it possible to put a number on that?
Not really, because we rewrote it so many times, and that was part of our development process. We would actually write the entire code base, throw it away, we'd rewrite it back and forth, and a lot of the original core CMS that was built was only built by a few people originally, and then it sort of grew over time. So tracking it over time is really hard, and it was so integral to our business. But we always used to think in terms of, $1 million for a Scrum team, let's say, right? And then we dedicate a Scrum team for this amount of period to see how much we could actually build for a product, and could we turn that into something that was sellable. Like, we would play with things like that, and sort of iterate our way into different products to see what the opportunity really was, and maybe sometimes bring in products a little too early to the market, but it was a good way of flushing things out. So it was a very controlled process, but a very fast-moving process too, because we were trying to invent while adapting to the feedback we were getting at the same time. So I know I'm completely dodging your question because I just don't know the answer to it.
Well, we had to rewrite the software one time because in the early days, we didn't really back stuff up. Back in like 1998 when we started the company, we had everything on laptops and brick laptops, and Dells, and 3 inches thick. They cost like $5,000. They're so slow. But yeah, Rick and Jamie left their laptops at home. Our house got broke into that we're all living in, and someone stole laptops. Everything's just gone.
With all the source code for all of Dealer.com on it, with no backup.
Piled.
That sucks.
So there's a couple late nights rewriting the whole system, but we got it done.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine what that would have been like. So on product, Jeff was asking me this the other day. I figured this might be a good one for you all. Like, how do you choose what code to build your foundation off of?
More like what technologies do you use at the end of the day? I mean, a lot of it comes down to having really good technologists that are part of the company that appreciate what it means to solve a good business problem, but also understands what technologies are out there. So a lot of it is researching the tech that's out there to see how it applies to a real business problem rather than just cool tech for the sake of cool tech. So a lot of what we were doing is researching cutting edge technologies and stuff. And, Java was all the rage back in the day. And we decided to take a bet on using that as a base language for our technology stack because of the benefits and because of how it was built to work with the internet. And instead of, what was the major one? Cold Fusion, I think, right by the Dreamweaver front page era. But we took some bets on technology because of how it allowed us to move extremely fast and how we could iterate even quicker with the product set. So in this day and age, it's crazy. It's almost like cheating because a lot of stuff is already built for you. You just go to a catalog at Amazon and find I have this service and this service, when back in the day we had to write all that ourselves. So finding good technologists that are part of the core of the company from the beginning, and I might be a little biased being an engineer, but a lot of entrepreneurs are out there I have this great idea, but they never partner up with a technologist from the beginning. And they're basically dead in the water most of the time because they don't have the technical acumen to actually manage a team to go out and outsource and build it. So a lot of the stuff, I know Mike believes in this too, is like when we're looking at companies and investing companies, is there that technological founder that's part of that mix to make sure that it's successful? And because there's just so many options and so many choices in this day and age, and you just have to be really intentional about what you do.
Somebody was showing Ruby on Rails. It's another good one. I know that's your favorite, Rick.
Yeah, we looked at that for a hot second. That was all the rage for a while.
Well, as we're coming up on the 2:00 hour, there is a question that we want to make sure we get in here. It's like, so how did the Dealertrack acquisition or merger or whatever, what was it, and how did it come about? And what did that feel like?
Yeah, we'd been talking to Dealertrack on and off with Mark O'Neill and his team for years. We'd always tried to stay close, and I think they might have even approached us at one point before the deal actually happened years before. But Mark O'Neill called me one day and wanted to come to Vermont for a meeting, and we ended up going to a local steakhouse and talking about the potential deal. And honestly, 90 days later it was announced, and a couple months after that it was done, and it was a whirlwind to go through. But it was really interesting because what we discussed was actually the logic of the deal first and the cultures of the company, and then the price was the final thing. So the concept and the vision of what we were all trying to do with Dealertrack and Dealer.com coming together was amazing. Like, we complement each other in so many different ways. There's very little overlap. We thought the cultures would be a good match on the surface, and then we got down to the final negotiation around price, and obviously lots and lots of due diligence and stuff. But it was a crazy 6 months that we had to go through. Very emotional and very taxing, and unfortunately it's not something you can talk about, right? So I don't know, Mike, was maybe 10 people maybe knew, throughout that process, and if that.
And we were approached to be, acquired several times.
Good point.
We always said no, and those early on too, like 04, 05, there was like some people kicking around trying to seeing us starting to grow. We have 1,000 clients going to 2,000 clients. Like, people are starting to pay attention, and you get on the radar. Organizations that want to own a chunk of the space, and it wasn't until we really saw just the business accelerating. We're like, why would we sell this right now? We were just going for it. Had the gas pedal down.
Yeah.
At that point in time. Right up until, when you get to $1 billion, take the foot off the gas and look around.
That's what I was going to ask. When do you decide, when do you make that decision? Obviously, if another company comes around, they're looking to acquire and the money's right and it's a good fit, just as it was with Dealertrack, it would make sense. But, I'm sure there's a lot of companies out there that pull that trigger maybe a little too soon.
Yeah. Or wait a little too long.
Yeah, true that. Yeah. Yeah, there's probably a couple of them that I'm thinking of offhand that probably waited a little too long and then got themselves into a situation where nothing was happening. Yeah.
So we touched on what you all are doing now at the beginning of the show, and people come in a little late or pick it up, later on. This will be recorded, and you'll be able to come and watch this again anytime, folks. But what are you all doing now? Let's throw that out there. One more time.
You mean in life?
All the above. And what do you do after you sell a company like Dealer.com?
I took a couple of years off and built a barn, did a bunch of profit work, and then got back into November 2017. I started another company called Fluency. Started that with 3 wizards, Eric Mayhew, Scott Gale, and Brian McVeigh. And those guys are, we're building an ad tech platform that is totally enterprise driven. So we sell to large agencies in and outside of auto. We actually are in auto, but we also sell in lots of different real estate vertical, multi-home vertical, home services, wedding space even. But yeah, we're building that business up right now. We just turned profitable, which is like our first milestone to really get over.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
You got a good
Nice.
crew there. They're all former orange bleeding Kool-Aid drinking guys, aren't they?
We're a bunch of ex-dealer.com folks at the company now.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Rick, what are you doing now?
Yeah, I decided that I couldn't retire. I just wasn't ready for it, and ended up staying on, as you guys know, with Dealertrack and then eventually Cox. But a little over 2 years ago, I decided to step away from auto for a little bit, and I was like, I'm going to take a year or two off. I saw what Mike did. He had a lot of fun. Maybe I'll build my barn. And that lasted about 9 months. After a 2-month road trip with my family, I decided it's time to go back to work. That was not the trigger, but it was definitely a time to do something again. And I joined up with a local company called Social Sentinel, where I'm the CEO now, where we scan different data sources, whether it's emails, chats, social media, for threats against kids. So we sell into the education market right now and try to protect kids on a daily basis. And it's given me a deeper appreciation for what goes on in the world, and some of what you see is pretty intense. But we've been able to save a number of lives and prevent some pretty big tragedies. So it's been a nice mission-driven company that we've been part of.
That's got to be rewarding.
It is. It's
That's
a little
awesome.
different than selling a car online, I gotta say. It's sometimes a little bit more intense, but
I bet.
the tech is absolutely incredible, really deep artificial intelligence, machine learning type of stuff. But I'm working again with a wonderful group of people and really enjoy every day.
That's very cool.
Yeah. The moral of the story is, no matter what, don't stop working, right?
Yeah.
Keep solving
Or
the
as long as
puzzle.
don't stop working if you're working with great people.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
It's like part of it is just enjoyment of like going and working with a great team and like doing really cool stuff. Like it's fun for me at least.
Keep solving the puzzle with good people. There we go.
Yep, exactly.
Well, we're past 2:00. I know that we could stay here for a while. We're going to need some alcohol if we're going to do that, though. I think it is Friday, and we'll let you two get back to saving the world and building more companies and kicking more ass.
Sounds great.
Great to see
Yeah,
you
pleasure having you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It's
See
been
ya.
fun.
Thank you.
guys. Okay. See you guys.